themselves on mute. We're glad to have you here. Welcome. It's our first CommuniTea of September. We have a few more on the schedule, ranging from food insecurity to voting Catholics. I hope that you'll continue to grab your lunch and your tea and join us. We are recording these, and today, if you have questions, if you could put them in the chat. And if you're not familiar with Zoom, if you're on a laptop or computer, the chat function is at the bottom of your screen. So if you toggle there, you'll find it. So many of you know our guest today, Sal Corbin. I had the opportunity to hear him through a program with DC Peace Team, and I thought it would be terrific for him to kind of kick off the fall with us at Holy Trinity. He's also, Jean was just talking to him, he works with Friendship Place, one of our neighboring groups we support, and so we are glad to have you here. Thanks, Sal.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley, and welcome everybody for your, I guess this is kind of your lunch hour, I guess, but whatever, thanks for sharing the space with me today. This hopefully will be an open dialogue. I am here to give some information on de-escalation, but feel free at any time to put a question in the chat. And if I don't see it, Ashley will let me know that there is one, and I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. First of all, let me check with Ashley. Can you hear me okay, Ashley? Okay, good. And if everybody could hit their mute buttons, that would be great. At any point, like I said, if you need clarification on something or further conversation, I am open to that in the time that we have. Let me just give a quick plug on the DC Peace Team, which basically is a team of peace building and peacemaking. Sorry about that. And sorry about that. That was me. I would mute myself, but I can't. Sorry about that. Peace building, peacemaking, peace maintaining really is the operation of, or the mission of the DC Peace Team, and we do that through trainings such as this one. We offer regular trainings in nonviolent communication, active bystander intervention, restorative justice, and nonviolent communication, among other things. We deploy unarmed protection units to different events, riots, protests, demonstrations. DC, as you know, is a hotbed for that. And we offer restorative circles, healing circles to the community in need. So, for example, we have been for the past year running healing circles in a neighborhood in Southeast where the neighbors are having differences of opinion with the daily visitors in the community that don't actually live there. And so we've been facilitating in that healing process. So those are kind of the three key areas that DC Peace Team does. We will not act because either we feel like somebody else will do it for us or is already doing it, or that it's just none of our business. And I say that to this audience because I used to be one of them. I was a very inactive bystander. I felt like it was none of my business, that other people would attend to it or already were. But the truth of the matter is, in many of those situations, it was really just an issue of inconvenience. I didn't want to be bothered. I had other things to do. I was on my way somewhere or whatever, and I didn't want to be redirected in any kind of way. But later in my life, I just reached a point where I didn't want to be an observer in the stands anymore. I wanted to participate, be a player, and that meant that I had to kind of step into a different space to do that. So today we're going to be talking about de-escalation and what we can do when it's directed towards us or others. You all know that this is something that is inevitable. And what do I mean by that? Well, conflict, right? We're going to have differences of opinion, views, perspectives. All you got to do is pop on the news or step outside your front door to see it now, right? But yeah, there's conflict everywhere. It's inevitable. It's part of our existence, and it's part of our wiring in terms of, human nature. And what the true test is or becomes is how we resolve that, right? How do we respond to it? And so after our time together today, I'm going to give you a nice acronym, a step-by-step process for dealing with escalating situations. I by no means expect you to be experts or masters of it coming out of it. It is an information session, and hopefully be able to answer your questions, but just be mindful and remember that we each bring different gifts to the table, right? Our strengths are somebody else's areas for work and vice versa. I say that to say, as we go through this together, in a step-by-step format, look at it as a process of walking towards helping or assisting someone or de-escalating a situation. There's no set rule or formula how it works. You have to be flexible and creative, often in very spontaneous circumstances. So be gentle with yourself. It is a walk. The first time that I ever became a player on the field, I did my interventions from a distance because I wasn't comfortable actually confronting somebody face to face. So I kind of kept a distance and used more nonverbal techniques until I gained my confidence and was able to move closer and closer to it. So I say all that to say, yeah, it is a journey, and some of you will feel more comfortable than others at different times, but you got to find your pace and rhythm, and that's okay. But I will say, obviously, the more you practice, the better your response. When I say better, the more immediate your response, and the more comfort you'll have in addressing whatever you're experiencing. But it's not a catch-all kind of thing. So just keep that in mind. Now, the other reason I give you that kind of preempt is because, as you know, the only thing that we really do have control over in any situation is ourselves, right? Misery loves company. So whenever somebody is out of sorts or uncertain or disoriented or angry or whatever, they love an audience. They usually love others to participate in that and either support them or fuel it. But when we are directly involved in those situations, that's the only thing that we do have control over, right? How we choose to react and respond. And so I want to focus on us today. I want to look inward, not externally, because, trust me. And when I started getting confident in my skills and thought, okay, I think I can handle just about anything. Trust me, that next day, sometimes that day, somebody would walk in the door and offer me a new scenario I'd never experienced before. So you can't possibly know and prepare for any kind of situation or person that comes at you in an escalating way. You don't know their history. You don't know what kind of day they've had. You don't know what kind of circumstances they're living in. And that's why you always want to remind yourself not to take it personal. A lot of times it's not, especially if you're in a service role, right? A lot of times it could be the institution or the system or the climate or the culture that they're angry at, but you're in front of them and they will direct it at you. So not to take it personal, but choose your responses. So when we are trying to de-escalate, the goals that we're trying to do is to rehumanize everybody that's involved. Now, often this could be just the person that is the aggressor towards you, or it could be an aggressor towards what we call the targeted person. So it could be a situation that you walk into. And often when somebody is angry or frustrated, they will use dehumanizing language or vocabulary. And one of the ways that we de-escalate is to kind of re-energize, refresh that perspective, that human perspective. A lot of times you'll hear people say, seeing the humanity in someone. Well, what that means is we are not de-escalating their issue. We are assisting in de-escalating the person, meaning valuing them, hearing them, and reaching them where they are, as opposed to trying to change them into something we want or need them to be based on their views, if that makes sense. I am never in disagreement with somebody when I am de-escalating. In fact, if anything, I'm aligning with their passion, their anger, whatever, and wanting to hear their story, if that makes sense. because a lot of times when we are frustrated or angry, we want to be heard. And so we're going to be talking about the value of listening today in our step-by-step process. But when you connect on the human level, however you hear that, that's what rehumanizes us and often will de-escalate the situation in the first place. Meaning folks want to be valued, folks want to be heard, folks want to be recognized. And when they aren't, a lot of times their volume goes up, right? So that's one of our goals. Diffusing the hostility, right? That's part of the process. We'll talk about the importance of staying calm here in just a minute. And that third goal says unleashing the constructive power. If we are assisting someone else, we don't want to take the power from them in their ability to respond. We want to assist in their power to handle the situation themselves. And I'll give you some very specific techniques on how we do that. And one of the first things that we do in that process, just giving personal example, when I work with Friendship Place and our mission is to end homelessness. And you run into homeless folks experiencing homelessness on the street all the time, especially in DC, almost wherever you go. And one of my first steps in that process is to have a normal conversation with them. First of all, to recognize them as a person. Hey, how are you doing today? Like I would respond or act or initiate with anybody in this session right now. How are you today? How are you doing? How's your day? Okay, what's your name? That's a normal conversation, a human conversation, right? That lets you know the other person know you're not speaking down to them. You're not assuming a position of power or authority, or assuming what you think the person needs, if that makes sense, right? A lot of times in service delivery, we will move right into what we think or know that the person needs, and we haven't even asked them. How about asking, are they okay? Asking if they would like our assistance. Those are some of the things that can help in these varied situations. Okay, having said that, now, this particular method that I'm going to offer you today is called the Clara Method. On this particular slide, it says Claire, so the last A is not on it, and I'm going to tell you why that is. The original acronym is Clara, but we took the A off this one because, and I'll qualify that, the last A stands for add. So center, listen, affirm, respond, and add. We're going to take the add off because the add we started to recognize, depending on how the audience received it, could actually escalate things. So you got to be very, very careful what you're adding to an already escalated situation. If that doesn't make sense, we'll come back to it later. But the 4 steps we really want to focus on today is center, listen, affirm, and respond. So the Clara Method, okay? Center, listen, affirm, and respond. I'll go through these steps and then I'll pause to see if there's any questions. So I'll just kind of talk through them and then we'll take a moment to see where everybody is. Now, and let me just say, most of us, when we respond to escalating situations, go right to the R. We're ready to respond, right? We're ready just to do something. The Clara Method actually slows you down a little bit. Now, you might say, well, if it's an immediate situation, how can I slow down? What if it requires an immediate response? It's an excellent question. Absolutely, timing, immediacy, those are things that will affect your ability to go through these steps, in a sequential process. Sometimes we have to act immediately. And for those of you who are saying, oh, I can never act immediately, I wouldn't even know what to say or do. Right, neither did I until I started doing the work. So eventually you reach a place where these responses become more automatic. They become more instinctual. You know how to get through them quicker. And you've already tried techniques possibly in other situations that have worked. So I hope that makes sense. Just in case you are one of the individuals that's sitting there and going, oh, I could never, I have no idea. I would be scared out of my mind if somebody, those are common, fears that people have, common concerns they have when responding to an escalating situation. But I said, again, as I said in the beginning, you'll get more grounded in that with practice and the more you kind of press into it. So, okay. Now, Universal rule of thumb, no matter what the situation is, when we are in a different space than somebody else, difference of opinion, difference of view, difference of perspective, and you can see that things are starting to escalate, is to stay calm, right? And that's that C, the centering there. Centering is we need to kind of put ourselves in a place for the optimal engagement. Now, if we had the time, we would breathe, right? We would take in lots of breaths. We would relax our muscles. We would look at our body posture. A lot of times we don't have a lot of time to do that, right? So centering could be something as simple as getting in touch with your heart rate, right? Making sure that you continue to breathe as opposed to choke up. Sometimes thinking of a calming person in our lives or statement or mantra can help us kind of just center ourselves. Now, let me tell you where centering shows up in the real world. No matter what type of intervention that you are trained to do, and especially emergency situations, the first step is always to center yourself. And another way of saying that is to make sure that you are in a safe place to intervene. So if you've ever flown on a flight and they say in the case that the cabin pressure changes, oxygen mask will drop, and they always say this, right? Be sure that you what? Put your mask on first before assisting others. Now this runs contrary to our instinctual sometimes reactions, especially let's say if we have loved ones or kids with us, immediately we want to go to help them, right? No, put your mask on first, right? Before you assist others. Put yourself in a place where you can help, where you can assist, where you can maximize that service, if that makes sense, right? But sometimes it goes counter to what we're thinking, like I have to just react first. That's whenever I do parent coaching, that's one of the harder things to get across to parents, and I get it because I'm a parent myself, right? It's like, you just immediately want to save them and make sure they're okay. But wouldn't it be even better if you were still around to see the saving and help that you give to somebody else? Psychologically, sometimes we say that there are some of you out there who are better at saving others than you are yourself. Or if you want to get deep, that you are trying to save yourself through saving others. We're just so good at helping others, we often deny ourselves in the process. Centering kind of gets you in the space to do that. And again, time will be a factor with this. Okay. Now, why is centering so important? Because in verbal escalations, right? Verbal escalations, the second step, the L, is to listen. We got to listen, right? For what is being said, what are the issues, what are the needs, what are the emotions. We have to become active listeners. And a lot of people claim that they are good listeners, that they are listening, but they're really just hearing. They're hearing words, but not listening to them. Active listening, folks, is an intention. It is not an action, if that makes sense. It is an intention to really hear, understand, and embrace the perspective of the person that is speaking to you, which means that sometimes we have to be humble. Sometimes we have to be patient. I'm really good at humility. I'm terrible at patience. I'm very impatient. I'm solutions oriented and want to just jump right into it. So that means I have to slow myself down and hear what they're saying, right? Get it from their view. There's a reason why they're in this space right now. And maybe I should seek to understand that as opposed to just react. One of my dominant personality traits is what's called a lion, which means that I engage conflict very quickly. If you yell at me, I'm going to yell back. If you cut me off, I'm going to cut you back off even worse. Volume begets volume and aggression begets aggression. This is what escalation is about, especially when you have two individuals that are constantly trying to one up the other person. It's going to that place, right? And we have the opportunity to diffuse that, right? By listening, right? Sometimes listening will allow you to identify with their struggle, with their pain, with their frustration. Sometimes we've had folks, when they truly listen, be able to identify with that pain, and then share their own experience with it. You know, I too have been discriminated against. I too have been hurt in relationships. I too was somebody cut me, you know, in line, and you know, so I know what that feels like. All these are ways of identifying with the aggressor and potentially de-escalating the situation. But you want to understand what lies at the core of the, you know, of their statement or their question. I, you know, was talking to a friend of mine the other night, and she will often, when you ask a question, she'll answer something that isn't exactly what the question asked. And I finally asked her why she does that all the time. How come she often will give an answer that doesn't really answer what the question said? And she came back a little later in that conversation and she said, Saul, you know, when you ask me that, it makes me feel stupid. And I realized that the way that I was giving feedback, I was asking the question because I truly wanted to understand. But I totally got that what she was hearing was like, who would answer a response that doesn't answer the question? That's dumb. That's what she was hearing and feeling. And when she gave me that feedback, I sat with it overnight for a minute and just said, okay, why is she feeling stupid? And then I was like, well, yeah, you know, that's one of the interpretations of why do you do this that way, right? And while that wasn't my intent, that's how it was being received. And so I created a safe space for us to explore that, for me to apologize and then share my intent. But you got to listen in order to get that, because I could have, you know, really reacted very defensively or even more aggressively. Well, you do it all the time. Well, I don't get it, and you know, you really need to work on that, and it makes our communication difficult, and you know, really, it's just frustrating for me. And that's how I could have responded to it, right? And probably the younger me might have responded that way when I was much more insensitive, right? But hearing it, embracing what the need is, and understanding it from their perspective. And my follow-up question to that was, I just want to make sure I understand, because maybe I can communicate a way that's different or better for you, for us to have the exchange. Maybe I'm asking the questions wrong, or maybe, you know, I can offer something differently that doesn't come across as demeaning or making you feel the way you did. So, okay. So listen to what the person is actually saying. Try to understand. You guys know that as a term, you know, called empathy, right? Empathy is trying to embrace the perspective of the other, right? Seeing it from their perspective. There's a Native American prayer that says, "Great Spirit, grant that I may not judge my neighbor until I've walked for a moon in their moccasins," right? Put yourself in their shoes, in their place, right? They don't have your life. They don't have your privilege. They don't have your history. No matter what's happened to you, it's different. So thus their arrival to wherever they are in that moment could come from a very different place. And if you're not listening, you won't get that. Okay. Step 3, the A, the affirm. When we affirm, all those things that I just talked about in terms of centering and listening allows you then to validate. Oh, I hear you. I get that. You know, I too have experienced that. I understand your frustration. I get that you're angry. That must be very difficult. Look, I've even, you know what my affirmation is sometimes? My affirmation it sounds like, I don't even know what to say right now, but thank you for sharing, because I know that must be really, really difficult. Like, because sometimes people can offer things that are so over our head, that are so emotionally laden, that we're not even in that space or ready for, or can't even imagine what that would feel like, right? But your statement of affirmation, of empathy is, wow, that must really be tough. Excuse me. Okay, thank you. All right. Now, the only thing I will say about affirmation, folks, is that it must and should come across as genuine. Now, if I just said anything in that demonstration, in my sharing of my own experience, that sounded plastic or fake, then that's a flag. Not only should you flag me, but you should flag anybody that sounds like that, right? Because one of the things that we can't stand, right? When we're upset and we want to be heard, is somebody responding to us in a cliche manner, right? Oh, it'll get better. It'll be, tomorrow's a different day. The grass is greener on the other side. Oh, I told you so. Whatever those statements are that can be very dismissive, right? And demeaning, and often shutting the person down or off. So it has to be genuine. And my genuine, look, and I want you to hear this very, very, very clearly. We are not affirming their view or perspective or their cause. Well, affirming isn't agreement. That's very, very important, right? I can accept your views without agreeing with them, because why? I'm accepting the person. I'm accepting the person that has presented themselves in this space with whatever uncertainty or anger or frustration that has got them or led them there. That's what I'm accepting, because I too have had those moments, right? The cause is not what I'm agreeing with. But look, I want to understand where you're coming from, man. I was in a session once. It was a circle, and we were going around, and the question was, well, who would you love to have lunch with, right? If you have lunch with anybody, dead or alive, who would you have lunch with? And I said two people. At the time, I said Barack Obama and Donald Trump. And everybody got Obama immediately. When I said Donald Trump, they were like, well, why would you want to? And I said, because I want to understand the man. Like, I might disagree with his views, but I don't disagree with the man. I want to hear and understand why he says the things he does and his purpose, right? Because that might help me to understand the whole movement there, right? And his supporters. That's a place of empathy, right? I'm not saying I agree, but I can understand and accept. Does that make sense? And that's where you build bridges with folks. That's what the political parties are not doing. They're just announcing their sides, and it has to be this way. And if you don't vote, then we're going to say no, and then we say no, and there's no cross communication. There's no collaboration. When you can embrace and understand the other side and where it came from, how they got there, that helps to move people towards each other as opposed to away. Is that easy? No, it's not always easy, especially when we have convictions about something, right? I mean, there's clearly things that people can embrace that I just can't be in relationship with. But it doesn't mean that I have to reject the person as being less than me or foul or they need work or help or whatever. That's their journey. That's not mine, if that makes sense. Okay, so having said that, affirm, I get where you are. This is difficult. And then you can move into your response, which is, and mine is always, how can I help? What assistance do you need? Before I am reaching out to that person that's experiencing homeless in front of me, I'm having a normal conversation. How you doing? What's your name? What's going on? And do you need my help? Let's ask for permission first. Like, you know, is this a situation where you are welcoming me in to help, right? So responding then is when you can either answer to the question, right, or the issue that's being raised. You can ask questions if the person is calm too, because a lot of times they're looking for the fight. And if you bring the fight, that's where it's going to go. But I'll give you an example. This is why step one is so important. You ever try to have an argument with somebody that's not arguing back? It's kind of stupid, right? I mean, it makes you feel like, oh, you're the only one that's animated. You're the only one that's bringing volume to it, and the other person's just kind of having a conversation with you. The calmness itself, the tone, right? The nonverbal posture itself oftentimes will bring the other person down, because what you're trying to do is bring them into a conversation as opposed to a debate or an argument, so to speak, right? And you have control over that. Your response is yours. My position is always understanding first, so I gotta listen, and then how can I help? What is it that you need in this moment? How can I show up to support you? And if their answer is nothing, I respect that. But here's the thing. We so often will move into what we think the person needs and offer that, and we haven't even asked. Right? And you're thinking the person needs a sandwich, and what they really need is a ride across town. You see what I'm saying? So when you ask for what it is they need, you are enrolling them in their own recovery, right? You're enrolling them in the process. You're empowering them to say what it is they need. And then you have the information on whether or not you can provide it. well, I don't have any money on right now. I can't give any change, but hey, if you like something to eat, I'd be more than happy to treat you, whatever. But at least you have the information as opposed to your assumptions. And think about how kind of that judgmental that could be, right? You have assumed you know what the person needs. That's what you're going to give them, right? Ask them what they need, okay? In terms of de-escalating, that's where I go with the person. You know, what is it you need right now? How can I hear more of your story? Giving them the platform so that they are heard, right? Maybe they just need dialogue with somebody. Maybe they just need distance. Hey, would you like to take a walk with me? Let's walk around the corner and tell me all about it. You know, I'm here to listen, whatever. Would you like to get a cold drink with me, some water or whatever? Anything that helps them to meet their need in that moment and keep things from escalating. Okay. All right, I feel like I've been preaching, so let me, and I'm not a preacher, so let me back off. And these other general tactics here are more for intervening with an aggressive person, like distracting them, or enrolling others, that's delegation, enrolling others to help you, sometimes positioning your body in between an actual argument. Those are tactics for much more advanced intervention. So here we're just talking about verbal escalations. So I am going to pause and let's see if there's any comments, any questions, any suggestions. I am open to it all.
If you want to take unmute yourself, if you don't, or you can type it in the chat and I can read it if you don't want to, or feel free to unmute yourself.
Ashley, I unmuted because my question was a little bit too long.
Sure, go ahead.
Can I talk now?
Yes,
okay.
Please.
So if I stay calm and listen, I'm just thinking about the incident in the park in our the Brooks that got me into your peace training in the first place. That a neighbor came up to a group of Black residents from the Brooks and said, "You can't use this park." Now, if I try to be a good listener, I might understand that they're thinking if 50 families use this tiny park, 50 families from the Brooks start using this tiny park, we'll never get a turn on the swings for our children, and it's just not going to work. You can't have a shelter open and everybody converge on this park. It'll no longer be a neighborhood park. So I mean, if I'm engaging with them to try to understand what their concerns might be, and then I affirm that I understand their concerns, that those are legitimate. How could I possibly expect the person who's been told you can't use this park, if I say, "Do you need my help?" or "Do you need my assistance?" I mean, I think they would assume that I was just on the other side and say, "No, we don't need you to help us."
Right. So one of the things that I didn't distinguish in this particular presentation was, so there's de-escalation when somebody is targeting us, right? There's de-escalation when you have a situation between two others. And even then you have to decide. You'll notice on the slide here, it says interacting with the aggressor. Why? Because we also have a slide that says interacting with the targeted person. So then you have to decide, well, am I interacting with the targeted person to de-escalate this? Am I interacting with the aggressor to de-escalate this? Sometimes both. There's a lot of different variations of this, Jean. And so in your particular instance, the statement wasn't made towards you, it was made towards somebody else. And so you have to assess what is going to be the most appropriate response and the most effective in terms of defusing that situation. And sometimes, believe it or not, sometimes the defusing isn't in the immediate, right? So meaning that is a conversation that needs to take place within the community. at the next forum, at the next council member meeting, or maybe in this situation, Gene, making sure that what you perceive to be the targeted person, that the harm is mitigated, right? So you don't even have to have a conversation with the aggressor in that situation, because it's probably not going to change or do anything to better the situation in that moment. But aligning yourself with the harm potentially that was caused with the targeted person, absolutely. And again, let's not assume that they are harmed, but you're asking, are you okay? Right, simply. And then, so yeah, because look, if they watch you just align yourself with the aggressor and say, I hear you, I understand, boom, 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 and then you turn to them and say, are you, okay? Of course it's gonna look that way. So that's not how I would intervene in that situation. I would check in with the targeted person to see if they're okay. And if they were, then I might engage in a conversation separately with that aggressor if I had that opportunity to create a space for that type of dialogue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Saul, we have a question in the chat. Could you comment on how you see the tactics being used in cities like Portland, or if they're not being used, where right-wing militias are showing up armed to confront racial injustice protests?
Yeah, one of the things that always comes up in our active bystander training is what happens if there's weapons involved. What happens if there's guns that are available, knives that are available? That's an entirely different training. It's kind of a step up from some of these general principles that we give. And of course, the risk factor goes up with those. I don't know if I have a whole lot of time to get into that now, but one of the things that we do is we still try to acknowledge the dignity in somebody while also contracting with them for possible weapons. This is one of the things we do in suicide prevention. We try to contract with a person that they won't be alone until we can arrive and be in their space. So you never want to leave them alone, kind of thing. So, contracting if we could take the weapon from them or hold it for them or something like that. But yeah, that's, when situations are as intense as they are in Portland, that's a much more challenging task. And because emotions are so intense, you have to be very careful about where you direct your energy, right? So I don't want anybody thinking after this session that I'm flying to Portland and I'm gonna walk in the middle of the crowd and start screaming my peacemaking techniques. It's not like that. You do what you can with what you have wherever you are. And my personal approach to Portland was I would start with the outliers. I wouldn't jump into the middle of the fray in between the police and the protesters. I would hit the what I call the outliers first and work my way in, as opposed to starting. Now, and don't get me wrong, there's no right or wrong to that. There are some that are ready to embrace the front line. They know exactly where to go and position their bodies or whatever, or start talking to the police. There's all of those interventions. But I'm talking about on our level right here, which I'm assuming we're not all ready to go to Portland and start either challenging the rioters or the police. But it's an excellent question, and we do have a whole another training that's specific to that.
I have a question about affirming, because on the one hand, I get what you're saying about not being plastic.
Mm-hmm.
At what point does affirming become making it about me and not you? So for example, if you're sharing your story and you say, I know how you feel because this incident happened to me, and I know that sometimes that can be kind of placating, you know what I mean? Taking the focus off the other and putting it onto one's self. So how do you talk to people about that particular
Yeah, is that Francis?
weakness?
No, I'm saying, was that Francis that just spoke?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay, Francis. Yeah, it's an excellent question. And it's kind of a deep question, Francis, because you got to be true and honest with yourself first, right? Meaning, your response needs to come from your heart. It does not need to come from a script, right? I can say to somebody that I hear you, or I get that you're angry without saying, I know what you're going through. Does that make sense? Yeah, I can see that you're angry. And, I really don't want us to be angry together. What can we do? Can we start over? Let me hear what you got to say. I mean, that everything I just said right then never said anything about validating their cause or you're right or I get where you are. I've been there before. I didn't say any of those things, but I hear you. I see you're angry. I'd like to hear more, and I don't want to be angry with you. So can we, just stay calm and I can hear more of your story, something like that. That can be very genuine without, because you're right. If you rush too quickly to, oh, I've been there too, or I know your pain, or, whatever, that can easily come, because you know what, if you came up to me like that on the street, my first question is going to be like, wait a minute, I don't know who you are. What's your name? Like, what do you mean you know what I've been through, right? I could be even more defensive. And thank you for asking that, Francis, because there's another piece to this. Folks, we are talking about tools, techniques, strategies that we can use in these situations. You're always assessing, because sometimes the things that you're trying to do to calm it will actually escalate it. And you want to pay attention to that, right? If you're trying to identify with somebody, affirming them, and you see that that's just getting them even more pissed off, right? Then you have to be aware of that. And you have to be like, oh, okay, this is what we call the shift. That's when you try a different approach, right? You wear a different hat. If I see that what I'm trying to do, even if it's genuine and calm on my side, is only further angering the person, then I try a different technique. For example, remember I was saying that it's hard to argue with somebody that's not arguing back? Well, you probably experienced this. Guess what? There's some people that get even more mad that you're not participating in the argument. They're mad because you're staying calm, right? Why aren't you as upset or involved or as engaged as I am? There are those situations. So when I see that, then I'll shift my approach. And I'll move more into, let's say if my calmness isn't working, I'll move more into caring. Hey, look, I'll be very direct. I care about you and I care about where you're at, and I don't want us to be like this. What can we do? Like, so if my calm shift isn't working, then I'll shift to a more direct approach, because that's what they're going to hear in the moment. But again, that takes practice, seasoning, experience to know where to shift and how to shift. So your points are well taken, Francis. And look, if it's ever not feeling genuine, if you ever feel like you're just giving a cliche response or a scripted response, my recommendation is don't do it till you truly feel it. Because people, they can test that, your true intent, right? And your true posture. Because if you give in like real quick or, then that's going to come across as insincere. But if you generally stand in concern or support of somebody else, that can be tested, but your consistency will support that. Make sense? Okay, thank you. This is a great question, Francis.
Thank you.
I have a question, especially during this time that we're all stuck inside. I see myself in probably some less volatile situations. When you're having, for example, discussions with people about politics or race, that sort of thing, people can get very heated about that. Do you see the same method working in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Susan. Well, so in general, the techniques work across situation. However, sometimes the issue is so volatile, as you've said, that it's not a conversation of anybody really hearing each other. And my interventions for those are very in the moment, and sometimes more passive than they are direct. For example, the major problem with these sensitive issues like politics and racism, things like that, is that people are convicted where they are, and then they speak from that conviction as opposed to openness, right? For me, it's about how can I create the safe space for us to have this dialogue. And safe does not mean comfortable. It's a big difference. Safe means that I won't be judged, but my views will be heard, right? And so a lot of people hear safe and they go, oh, then, you know, we can relax and say whatever we want to say. Look, folks, difficult conversations exist for a reason. They're difficult. And my answer to that is, okay, so they're difficult. Look, if anything worth having on the other side, it wouldn't be easy. So I'm not afraid of difficult conversations. Things will be said that are uncomfortable. But here's the thing. If you truly want conflict resolution and transformation, you have to hear that passion. You have to hear that anger. You have to hear the expression of that history first. And this is the part that a lot of people just bypass. They jump into that R instead of listening and understanding. That's why I don't have an issue with the opposing political party. I want to understand how and why they got there. And I can still embrace the person as opposed to their political views, right? Now, it doesn't mean we're going to be hanging out all the time or going to the pool hall together or whatever necessarily. But yeah, I mean, I have lots of friends that have opposing views or different religious perspectives, right? You know, the thing is we want to create that safe place in the same way that we want to be heard, right? You know, we are people of faith, right? So, and I love the golden rule. It says what, you know, love your neighbor as you love thyself, right? And my thing is, yeah, but what if you don't really like yourself? What does that statement say, right? That entitles you to not like others, right? Or treat others, you know? So how about this? How about love each other as you would want to be loved, right? Love each other as you would want to be loved. Love others, love your neighbor as you would want to be loved. That provides the platform for, well, then I want to give them the same grace that I give myself. When I make a mistake or I commit a sin or a violation, I want people to hear my side of the story. I want them to hear what happened, how I got there, what my perspective was, and my apology. But if I don't then turn around and offer that to the other side, of others that have created, you know, violations or made mistakes or have a different perspective, then that's very selfish, right? That's very self-centered. So I have to give that same space to the other side that I would give myself. And, you know, that's what our restorative justice circles do, right? Where you get to sit in a circle where nobody is leading, but everybody is listening, right? Hearing, accepting, receiving. Remember, accepting doesn't mean agreement. Accepting, receiving. So yes, is it more difficult to create those spaces sometimes? Absolutely. Absolutely. But is it worth it? Most of the time it is for me, but you also have to choose your battles, right? Meaning sometimes I recognize that this particular moment isn't a moment to engage that person, right? Let them just vent, get it all out, scream, holler, shout, whatever, right? Shoot their gun in the air, whatever, let them get all that out. And then calm down, and then we can have that conversation. Sometimes that moment isn't the moment to engage. You got to be able to assess that as well, right? That's why whenever I'm dealing with somebody that we say is a difficult customer or client, whatever, and they come in and they're complaining up and this and that and the other, let them speak. Let them get it all. I want to hear all of it. I just sit there in silence, focused on them so that I'm paying attention and just let them just keep on talking till they don't have anything else to say. And believe it or not, half the time that does the de-escalation itself. Why? Because the person just wanted to be heard. Now you can have a dialogue about, well, how can we fix that? What can we do together to correct that? How can I support you? Thank you. Other questions, other comments? You know, I talk about the safe space. Let me just throw in a couple of add-ins. The safe space should be that we have created a space where it's okay to say what we need to say, share our views without rejection, without whatever, but also a secure space, right? And we're not just taking what we say in this moment and sharing it with everybody else without their permission, that we respect people's stories, right? With confidentiality. Why? Well, because people can be identified through the stories that they share, right? And so without their specific permission, this is a safe, secure haven for both of us. And then third, and this applies to de-escalation, folks, sometimes you got to step into the brave space. You're going to have to step into spaces that aren't comfortable, that aren't in alignment with your emotions or your anxieties at the time. But the question is the good greater, right? That I can serve in this moment. That's a spiritual question. right? That could be a faith question. And sometimes that's above and beyond you and where your conditions and boundaries and limitations are. Look, folks, I don't like conflict. That's why I didn't participate in it for most of my life. I would much rather watch the event, the rally, the DNC, RNC conferences and from home on TV without conflict. I wasn't going down there with that mess, people raising flags and pointing things at each other and screaming and shouting. No, that's crazy, it's madness, all right? Until I decided to become a player. And I had to find out what that voice was and how that was gonna look, utilizing my strengths. If Gene and I show up to the same event, we're not gonna look the same in how we respond and intervene. But we are responding and we're doing what we can with what we have where we are. And so have confidence in that. But look, sometimes you gotta step out your comfort zone, folks. Like, I mean, it's an escalating situation. Now it's just you and the other person, that's a little easier to navigate and manage. But when it's others that you're intervening on behalf of, that can be very challenging. So gotta know what that is, and it's gonna be uncomfortable sometimes. So
I'll have a quick question. I know we're running out of time, but
yes.
I saw something on Facebook a friend posted yesterday, and they started recording it on their phone after the incident had happened, but it was at a track, and a person of color, I guess, was in a lane, and the couple didn't like it. I don't know if anyone else saw it, but you went back to something, and I guess my question, in our desire to be supportive or get involved, kind of like what Jean mentioned earlier. So is the first step, if you see something like that, to say, are you okay? Do you need help? Or is it like, hey, you need to keep moving? So on this video, the woman jumped in and said, stop talking to him like that, move along, get out of the way. And I'm just curious, you kind of had said a couple different things, and I'm just curious, how you might, in this day and age, like what might be the way forward?
Let me be completely transparent, Ashley, because I've talked about my strengths, right, in learning this process. Here's my area for improvement. Happens every single time I come across a situation that I can intervene with. Every single time. The first thing I think is this any of my business, right? Like, is this something I need to be sticking, my paws into, or should I just leave this alone? And you know what? Realistically, it's a good thing and a limiting thing. It's good in that I'm allowing the space to speak for itself first. I'm not just jumping in whatever I think is needed. Like, I'm assessing first. Secondly, sometimes that will lead me to not intervene when I actually should have, right? So because I do believe that some situations aren't any of my business. I truly believe that, right? Sometimes you can throw your 2 cents into something and make it worse. And a lot of people don't realize that. Like, if you just let it be, it'd have been okay. What's the point I'm trying to make? Well, there's no 100%, right, with this. It's hit or miss, but you got to assess based on what gifts you can bring to the situation that you think are helping. When I start to see things move to, usually when I hear verbal escalation, it puts me, I open the ear, it puts me on pause, but I don't jump in. If it continues to escalate to the point where it might become violent or something, or unreasonable, then I'll step in. But I don't, at the first sign of, some kind of irritation or accusation or insult, I don't jump in. No, a lot of times those situations will take care of themselves. That is a difficult assessment to make sometimes. So thank you.
And again, sorry but I just think we all keep talking about, as a white person, I don't want my silence to be taken as what that other person is saying is okay. So that was kind of where as a white person, I'm in that tricky spot right now of like, I don't think that's okay, but
It's very tricky. And let me just say that is not limited to white people. It's not, people of color, trust me on this. We don't know what to say and think sometimes. We're not all on the same page with our responses. And so, it's amazing the conversations that are being had now. You can't say black and white anymore because now it's black, indigenous people, it's all these different categories that people have put themselves, and you don't know what to say anymore, but you can still respond to the human side of things. But trust me, when you start talking about racism or certainly politics, sometimes lifestyle choices. It can be very, very sensitive. And so I try to present myself in a humble, non-judgmental, open, and accepting way so that we can have that conversation. And yeah, sometimes that's easier than others. So
Right.
thank
Thank
you.
you. We're at the hour. I don't know if there's any kind of closing remarks you may have. I put the address for DCP's team in the chat. I know Jean and I have done some of the trainings. If you want more in-depth training on some of these issues on a variety of topics, not just the Clara Method, I invite you to go there. But any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's kind of loose and vague, but look, folks, do what you can to build relationship first. When you just come at people with your intervention, and sometimes it calls for that, they don't know who you are. When you have the opportunity to start in a relationship with somebody with normal conversation, then build up to how or what they might need, that's always better if you have the opportunity to do that. Because trust, rapport, respect, those are the building foundations for intervention. So thank you. Thanks everybody for your time today. I appreciate you being here on your lunch break or whatever. Great questions. Boy, you had me. Yeah, I have to be on top of my game. I'm telling you, that was good stuff. Thank you. You're muted, Ashley. So
All right, I said we'll have to have you back because I think
I'd love
this
to come
was a
back
great
and share
start
and
of
learn with you.
conversation. Maybe we
you know
can.
what? And you know, Ashley, what we can do if we have further sessions and you want to continue this conversation, we can have, breakout rooms and visit different scenarios. How do we deal with this? What would you say to that? Practice some of this stuff. It'd be fun. Well,
Yeah,
fun.
so everybody let me know what we didn't cover that you want to, and we can definitely revet this with Saul.
Appreciate you
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Enjoy
you
the
very
rest of your
much.
day.
So,
Bye,
thank
Jean.
you.
Bye, Ashley. Thank you so much,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, Sal.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Ashley.
Bye.